Colomboscope is an interdisciplinary arts festival. We work with a range of local and international artists and collectives. We see ourselves as among the festivals and biennials that dot the region. We're aware that many of these have in fact been postponed or cancelled in recent months. And so our hearts lie with those colleagues who have been working against the odds to make these circumstances of culture happen. In fact, our solidarities are also with the festivals such as Chobimela in Bangladesh, the photography festival that has been a close collaborator of Colomboscope. The Gujral Foundation in New Delhi has been a long-time partner of the festival as well. This time there are key partnerships in the UAE, which include the Ishara Art Foundation in Dubai that has supported our reading room, Reading in Tongues, as well as Warehouse 421 in Abu Dhabi, where the festival will be hosted in part with a number of exhibits. Historical precarities and volatile conditions are not new to Sri Lanka, and therefore the pandemic is one such hurdle that we have been working ingeniously towards together with our team. We have been fortunate to host a number of local and international artists at this Colomboscope, and we look forward to sharing some of their work with you today. We are now at the Colombo Public Library, the largest of 6 festival venues. It has been really interesting for Colomboscope to discover the various parts of this fully operational library, Sri Lanka's largest library. We're using parts of the garden, which include a war memorial. There are projects by German Sri Lankan photographer Liz Fernando, as well as Sri Lankan artist based in Toronto, Rajni Pereira. Inside the auditorium, there are film installations, sculptures, and community archives presented by artists and poets alike. Another really interesting part of the library is an old school newspaper room, and this includes drawings by the artist Jagat Veerasinghe. He is also an archaeologist, and in fact what we show are drawings and notes that he has made while traveling through the island to archaeological sites and doing this sort of note making his own maps and anecdotes and sketches for paintings that appear later. These are very private, and yet they stand in such a fun and colorful way in relationship to the everyday news cycle as news readers come into this very special room. We're also using other parts of the library for workshops and installations that are being visited very enthusiastically. Behind me is a project by Rupanithan Pakyaraja. Rupanithan is an artist from Batticaloa with whom we've been working with for quite an extensive period. In fact, he's also been part of the residencies that Colomboscope did for the very first time. These included pairing artists from Sri Lanka with regional and international artists, in this case Aziz Hazara from Afghanistan. Rupanithan has been making this set of sculptures and drawings that reflect on the landscape and ecological fragilities of the coastal zones in Sri Lanka, but also Sri Lanka's north that has suffered massively through the civil war. The ways that infrastructure and extractivism dig into the ground and scar the landscape, as well as minority lives, is a concern for this artist. We are at the second largest venue of Colomboscope, the Rio Complex. This is a 7-story erstwhile hotel building and cinema at the ground floor. It's a building that has a layered history. It was attacked during the 1983 Black July pogrom. It is a space that we have returned to, a memory chamber that echoes with several kinds of histories of ethnic diversity, of division, and of erasure. In this room, we have the work of MTF Rukhsana, a young artist whose first major exhibition this is. And she presents work as a young Muslim woman dealing with the legal violence around the laws that surround divorce, especially among the Muslim community. But further, she's also thinking about how to be a listener, how to witness, and build testimonies for women who have survived sexual violence and oppression. The other works included in this building resonate with sonic approaches. There's a lot of music, there's sonic flows that also include the sound of waves, the sound of fire. There's work that once again reflects on histories of violence. For instance, the work Takbir by the artist Aziz Hazara. This is a film that Aziz made during his residency in Colombo and continued to do so during his time in Berlin, where he is. As an artist from Afghanistan who is witnessing the unraveling of the takeover of the Taliban or the return, the issues around the country are on one hand dramatized by the Western media, but in another way also systemically erased. And so his film deals with light and shadow, the cries that accompany the night of takeover, and at the same time the songs of martyrdom that have a very mixed reception abroad, but are freely circulating within the terrain. These stories of minority histories are of special focus for us here. Another such work on the same floor is by the artist filmmaker Pallavi Paul, who reflects on the years of emergency in India in the 1970s, as well as student movement back then and today.
The curatorial framework for Language is Migrant draws inspiration from artist and activist Cecilia Vicuna's poem Manifesto of the same title, which holds that movement and circulation is integral to all life forms and also oceanic, galactic, and tectonic drifts, as well as linguistic and cultural forms that have emerged and evolved at their cross currents. Fully cognizant of the historical era of forced movement, we also consider narratives of loss and longing, which are accompanied by declarations and triumphant assertions of belonging. Surpassing linguistic codes and literary forms of expression, which are also part of the festival, we also have artistic presentation that consider embodied forms of expression and narratives that also are able to record silence and cultural amnesia. From narratives at the Colombo Public Library that propose alternatives to official institutionalized library collections through oral narratives and speculative forms of knowledge, we move to the Rio Cinema Complex, which has a range of works that present sonic narratives of more than human life forms and also testimonies that have been collected by artists from various communities around the world. This is also joined by visual expressions at all of our venues, including reading in tongues at the Lakmahal Community Library, which is a space which is not silent like the library, but where artist publications are brought to life by performances, conversations, and discussions. As soon as you enter the Rio Cinema Complex, you will see Palash Bhattacharyaji's 3-channel video installation, which considers the confluence of dialects on the river Karnafuli in Chittagong. Following this, you will encounter Tisithoradeniya's work, which considers displacement within the island during the colonial period. Tisithoradeniya's family was forced to migrate from regions where businesses were controlled by the Portuguese towards the inland Canty, which is a hill kingdom, where they were forced to work in construction, and being migrant workers were denied salt, an essential condiment in culinary recipes. This led to unique and inventive ways of making food, whose memory traces endure even today in his family archives. As you enter the first floor, you will encounter Omar Wasim's soundscape constructed from traces gathered across the island during a residency organized by Colomboscope. After this, the theme of sound continues into Baran Ijlal's work, Change Room. Here, we've presented a selection of over 1,000 recordings made by the artist with vulnerable communities across the region, including sex workers, migrants, ousted forest dwellers, as well as lawyers and office goers. Here, the artist tries to provide a home through the archive for stories and experiences that have been forcibly silenced from mainstream narratives and dominant accounts of history. After this, you encounter Dhanushka Marasinghe's video-based work, for which he researched colonial archives and worked with images that were used to represent the colonized. He talks about how these methods of documentation have persisted to current day state-led infrastructures as surveillance mechanisms that document and control public spaces.